Oh man. Let's see here. Whew. All right, let's see. Let me set this up a little bit. Back this up. Whew. Man, that thing is close. All right. Hello there. Oh man. Let's see. Get this together. All right, so we are back again, going through the rest of First Peter this evening, and I meant to go through it earlier this week. I'm sorry, I've been so busy. I haven't had the opportunity to do nothing. And last night I was supposed to shoot one, and our two youngest kids didn't sleep at all. And so we barely slept at all Saturday night and had to be up early Sunday. I had a bunch of stuff to do at church. So it was just exhausted last night. I couldn't actually, I think I went to bed at like 11 o'clock, which is unheard of. I do it every once in a while, but I was not able to shoot a class. Plus this particular, I'm not going to lie to you. You know, I told my buddy Parker that I was studying a little extra for this class, and he was like, "What's so hard about this particular one?" And it's because of the subjects we're going to go through. I'll try not to make this one as long. I always say that, and then we go like an hour and 40 minutes. But I want to try to go through this one. This one's tough personally for me. Maybe tough for you, and you'll see why I say that when we start going over it. But it's I would say a convicting, more of a conviction thing for me. But in any event, if you got your Bibles, we're going to finish out Second Peter. We're in First Peter. I'm sorry, finishing out First Peter chapter 2. We're going to finish out First Peter chapter 2, and we're going to be starting in verse 13, and we're going through verse 25, which will be the end of the book. And you'll be able to see why here in a second, why I feel that this one is tough personally for me, and maybe maybe yours as well. So here we go. Especially if you're if you'll see, if you're a lover of country like I am, and a lover of the freedoms we have here, especially the freedom to own weapons and things of that. This ties into all of that, and that's why I kind of want to get into that. So here we go. Let's just read through it, and then we'll come back and fill it out. All right. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as to them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God, that with well doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. As free, not using your liberty as a cloak for maliciousness, but as servants of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unreasonable and forward. For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongly. For what glory is it if when you be buffeted for your faults, you shall take it patiently? But if you do well, but when you do well, if you suffer for that and take it patiently, this is commendable before the Lord. For even here were you called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that we should follow in his footsteps, who did no sin, neither was any deceit found in his mouth, who, when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judges righteously, who his own self bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sin, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. For ye were as sheep going astray, but are now returned to the shepherd and bishop of your souls. So obviously, going through that, the troubles arise. Okay. Verse 13. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to be king as supreme, verse 14, or to governors as unto them that are sent to him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. All right, so like Nebuchadnezzar says, God sets up kings and God takes down kings. There isn't a king alive or ruler alive that God didn't put there. As one of the pastors listened to here and there would say, there's no maverick molecule in the world, in the universe. There's no thing, even down to the smallest molecule, that's doing whatever it wants. Everything is obeying the will of God at all times, even the wicked, even, he controls everything all the time. In him all things consist. He is in control he is totally sovereign over everything that happens. Therefore, Joe Biden, if you want to go into that, was placed there by God himself. And the reason would be not because Joe Biden's a godly man, because he's not, period, at all. None. I know he goes to the Catholic services and all that, and he thinks he's saved, but got news for him. Not a chance. And that's not to say he couldn't be. I'm just telling you he ain't. And that's by, and I do want to preface that by saying, I saw an article the other day that says, the problem with Christians is that they're too tolerant of evil. They're so tolerant anymore. They're even tolerant of evil. They even celebrate it in their churches. As far as you have some churches which claim to be Christian churches that, well, for one, the major ones like Catholic churches, which I would not call a church, but the Catholic churches, the Church of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Church of the Mormons, all of those right off the bat would be apostate churches. Not even apostate, because apostate is somebody who once had it and turned away, or professed that they had it and turned away. They're not churches at all. But one of our jobs, and I don't mean our job like you need to actively be doing that, but I guess you would have to. One of our jobs as Christians is to test every spirit to see whether they are of God or not. In meaning, the way you do that is by looking at someone's life and how they live day to day, how they operate, what is important in their life, what do they do, those type things. Like if you run into someone, and we say profession of faith is not possession of faith. And this is one thing that I think the world has gotten really blown up. And anytime you see anything about Christians, from the world perspective, it's always terrible. And what I mean by that is the world accounts everyone who claims to be a Christian. Just because they say I'm a Christian, the world says they're a Christian. Christians know better than that, because we know the Bible, and the Bible doesn't teach that at all. You are to test every spirit to make sure they are of God. Acts 17:11, which was one of my staple verses it still is, but that the Berean Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica, because they received the word with all readiness of mind, but they searched the scriptures daily to prove whether what Paul was saying was so. They listened to the Apostle Paul. They took in everything readily, with their minds open, listening to what he had to say, but they took notes, or however, they listened to whatever he had to say, and then they went home and they compared what he was saying to the scriptures to make sure whatever he was saying was accurate. Our job is to look at the way people live. And if when you look at, for instance, Joe Biden, and you're talking about the way he lives, the things he supports, the things he pushes, it's not Christian in the least. Here's my problem with some of these verses. I don't have a problem with the verses. The problem that it causes me is submitting to a government that is tyrannical. And our government is way past tyrannical at this point. I mean, we talk about the Constitution and things like that, rights. I mean, as Christians, we don't have rights. I know our Constitution says that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, but we all are created equal, yes, and we all are endowed by our Creator with things, yes. But in true Christian life and form, we submit even our own bodies to the Lord. They're not ours. Our bodies are not ours. Our homes are not ours. Our cars are not ours. Our businesses are not ours. None of that is ours. Our children aren't ours. We just steward whatever God gives us. And we take care of it like it's his property. We, as far as children go, train them up as his children. All of our life, all of our rights, everything we have is in submission to him. Being in submission to a government that is, you don't have rights anymore. I mean, your right to free speech is gone. They're pretty much taking, your rights to Second Amendment. They're trying to get rid of that. And they use lies to do it. The arguments that they use are terrible. Like, you shouldn't own an AR-15 because you shouldn't be hunting with an AR-15. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting at all, period. None whatsoever. Your Declaration of Independence tells you such things as, when a government becomes tyrannical, and I'll paraphrase it, and people are enstrained beyond absolute despotism, it is their right, no, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new forms, new guards for their security. Our government is using currently the arm of the DOJ and whoever else, and I try to stick with God's. I don't even want to deal with that stuff. But when do you draw the line in obeying what they say and submitting to God and submitting yourself to all authority because of the Lord? All this, rebellion against authority, rebellion against, you see, it's so hard for me sometimes, like rebellion against police officers. If you want to start at the lowest chain and start working your way up, but I believe a lot of police officers have earned the flack that they're getting. How many dirty cops have you seen? Or, cops throwing drugs in people's cars and them arresting them for it. Seen it happen. You can watch it. You can watch it on YouTube. There's cops going to jail for it all the time. When you talk about, drugs, as far as, if you remember the movie American Gangster with Denzel Washington. When Frank Lucas, when he, went down, he took like 200 police officers with him that were all working for him, all doing dirty work for him. Cops are supposed to be above the law, and that doesn't mean above it as far as they're above it is it doesn't apply to them, but they need to hold themselves to a standard that's so high, because they are ones enforcing the law. It's the same way in the Christian world. We are here to enforce the laws of God, to remind people of the laws of God, to say when we see things that don't conform with the laws of God, to call that out. That's one of our jobs, and Christians don't do that anymore. We don't. Most of them don't even know the law of God anymore. So it's been hard for me submitting myself to certain things when if you notice in verse 14, he says, or unto governors, as to them who are sent by God, sent by God, for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. But see, what we're doing now in our country is praising those who do evil and punishing those who do well. There is some stuff out there that's going on in our country today that is, California is way off the map, always have been, but I believe Gavin Newsom's trying to pass a bill now where children who if your child wants to be transitioned, which there's no such thing, but if that's what we're calling it, if your child wants to be transitioned and you disagree with that, they can take your children away from you for being a bad parent. That is, we I've mentioned this before, but when people mention evil people or bad people, they always mention Adolf Hitler. Although Adolf Hitler killed 18 million people roughly, which is terrible, but we've killed 80 million in abortion. The sexualization of our children in schools, they're marching down the streets in gay pride parades, with little kids on standing by watching, 4, 5, 6-year-olds just standing there watching, and they got naked men rolling. That's called pedophilia. Those are pedophiles. We prosecute people like that. We're not doing that anymore. We're celebrating it. Churches, even with gay pride flags all over their doors, promoting sin that Jesus died to remove from your life. It is, I feel like, Lot, when it says that he lived amongst these wicked people and his soul was just vexed every day from the evil that he saw constantly going on. If you remember, if you've ever seen the movie The Green Mile, in the last, up to the last scene where they're going to kill John Coffey, he says, you basically saying killing me will be doing me a favor, because all the evil that I see all around me all the time is like shards of glass in my head, and I'm ready to get away from it. I can't believe how far we've fallen, and to young men, if you watch my channel at all, or if this gets out anywhere, the just utter destruction, of our country. I didn't care about in my 20s. I didn't care about the country like that in my 20s. But when I started having kids and getting older and looking at all the sacrifices other people had made on our behalf and what they're doing as far as the lies that are being told to destroy our country and things of that nature, it's just, I am not, and as you know, I'll give you an example of this. I am not a Trump dude. Okay. I would never, ever vote for a Democrat, period. And I'm getting to where I don't even want to vote for Republicans anymore either. I mean, you got, what was that girl's name? Laura Boebert or whatever, supposed to be some Republican lady. She's up on there crying about transgenders are trying to take our kids away and do these things, which they are. She's not lying. And then she says, and then they catch her out with a Democrat guy who owns a club that hosts these events, and she's all gets kicked out of a movie for being all hands-on with the guy. Hypocrite. I mean, all of them, they're all hypocrites. All of them got to go. All of them. Done with all of it. I mean, the only reason this stuff is allowed to go on is because both sides are in on it. I'm convinced both sides are in on it. I'm done with it. But I am not a Trump guy, but it does irritate me. If you think about it, if Trump would have went away after he lost, if he would have just played golf the rest of his life, never, I'm done with politics. I'm done. I'm just going to, sit. They would have never come. They're going after this man because they don't want him to run again. All these, the lady who, check this one, the lady who's doing the Fannie, whatever her name is, in Georgia, is pushing these indictments. Half of the people, listen to what I'm saying to you, half of the people that are in jail currently in her county are in jail currently in her county. Over 50% of the people that are currently in jail in her county have not been charged with a crime. How do you go to jail if you've not been charged with a crime? In the United States, the police aren't allowed to hold you for more than 24 to 48 hours before releasing you without the charge of a crime. If they don't charge you with a crime, they can't hold you longer than, I think it's 48 hours. Coming from someone who's been to jail a couple times, when I was younger, I knew the police on a first name basis. I can't believe the stuff that is going on. I mean, I literally can't believe it. We're so far into it now that nothing shocks me anymore. The point I'm making with Trump is I'm not even a Trump dude. What's up, brother? I'm not even a Trump guy. But to see Americans cheering that they're putting charges against him like they are, if they can do that to a president, imagine what they can do to you. And it's coming. I find it very, very, and people cheer for that. You don't understand that in cheering for the government, illegally going after somebody just because you're their opponent, means they can do 10 times worse to you. You don't have a $7 billion. Correct, brother. Jeremiah 33. I'll look that up. So you don't have $7 billion. You're not famous like this man is. It's not just easy to take someone out like that. You and me are nobody. One of my favorite Christians through history was Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer was imprisoned for an attempt on Hitler's life. He was going to kill him. He had a part in it, a hand in it. He might not have been the one to actually pull the trigger, pull the bomb, whatever. I can't remember what they were doing. The books, that thick. I haven't read it in a couple years, but initially he was put in prison. The final time he was in prison, he was put in prison for an attempt to take Adolf Hitler out. He was done with it. whenever they asked Dietrich Bonhoeffer what he prayed for at this particular time, he said, I pray for the destruction of my country because we've done such great evil. I just pray that God would just destroy it because it's way too far gone now. I feel the same way about our country, even though I am a very patriotic person. It kind of hurt my feelings this year with the 4th of July because it was like, what are we actually celebrating? The things that all 4th of July and all that stands for, those things don't even operate during day to day. That stuff is gone. I see people flying flags all day on the 4th of July. And then, I always have flags, everywhere. And it's that one day you see them and then you don't see them anymore. It seems like everybody's united that day. And then after that, it's total chaos again. And I have a flag in my truck that a small one that I got from there, and I just stuck it up there, and it kind of hangs in my window. So when my window's down, it's flapping in the breeze, and you can see it. And I pulled up to the bank, like 2 weeks ago, and to make a deposit, and the girl's like, "Well, you're going super patriotic today," and it's like, patriotic today? What are you talking about today? It should be every day. You know what I mean? Eric says, not proud to be an American, but thankful to be. I would say maybe. I mean, I'm proud to be an American because I'm not, because I don't identify. I don't call the people who are doing all what they're doing American. Joe Biden's not an American. Our government, they're not American. These people that are looting and burning down stores and stealing left and right, they're not American. Those aren't Americans. Those are something else. Americans would never deal with that. Like that song that, Jason Aldean wrote, "You Tried Us in a Small Town." I mean, you got the freedom to burn a flag, but I can tell you this: if I see you burning a flag, there's going to be a problem. Period. Because of the hypocrisy of it. And we get back to that again, is that the red on your flag stands for the blood that was shed of all the men died to give you the freedom to burn a flag. And you may have the freedom to burn it, but you don't realize that you're spitting in the face of all the people who died to give you that freedom. That's just the dumbness of it. Someone died in order for you to have the right to do. Look, you can have the right to do many things. Doesn't mean you should. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that's a big thing we're going to get into in a couple of verses here. But, I was reading through a lot of commentary on these sections of scripture we're going through. And, Calvin had a good insight is what he's saying is like when we're saying, yeah, I obey the government, but our government has become tyrannical. So now I got a problem. And Calvin said, the government that was in charge when this epistle was written, they were tyrannical. You're talking about the Romans, who eventually in history, by the way, it's said in history that Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. That's history. As far as I want to say that it's not fact. We don't have any evidence of it. It was just in writings that this happened, but we don't have any evidence of it. So we'll take it on that face value. But the Romans are in charge at the time of this epistle, and Calvin said, the apostles sure didn't have that attitude. They weren't like, hey, we're under a tyrannical government. It's time to pick up some arms and start whacking some people. You know what I mean? If they come to my house, I'm going to take them out. They didn't have that attitude. That's a tough one for me. Because I feel this way, that And like I told you, this is a hard subject for me. I feel inside like you can do whatever you want to me. However, when you start talking about my wife and children, now I got a problem. And I listen to, if you've never listened to this podcast, okay, this particular one I'm going to tell you about, I think you should. It's on Jocko Willink's podcast. It's from a while back. There's a woman on there named Rose, and she has a book that she wrote called The Two That Survived. The Two That Survived. And she was in Auschwitz, and she was taken there when she was a child, I think 10 or 11, maybe 12 years old. And she had 2 sisters, 2 brothers, mom and dad. So very quickly, the story goes, they came and took her dad early, to the Nazis did, to start working. They were Jews. And she said, first off, they had to, wear some type of patch on their clothes. That's how it started. They, people started hating Jews. The anti-Semitism started coming out. Then they started having to wear patches on their clothes that identified them as Jews, and people started treating them different. And then they came and took the dad and took him off and to work in factories to build bombs and bullets and whatever else. And then eventually they came for the whole family. They loaded them up on a train. She said they rode for days and days and days, no water, no food. People are piled on top of each other, using the bathroom on each other. And they stroll into this concentration camp. And she said they put her mother and her 2 young brothers, they were 9 and 6, the same ages as my sons right now. They put them and the mother in a line, put the 3 girls in a line. And she said, when you get to the end, she said, I didn't find out until way later when I made it out that line that my brother and my mother were in were directly gas chamber. So they got off the train and gassed 9-year-olds and 6-year-olds. And if you think our country wouldn't start gassing children or killing children, just look at, we've already killed 80 million children in abortion. 80 million. People do not have any care about human life, children's lives. So, I mean, when you look at our government, which says we want to ban, these guns because they're killing our children, but then you have that same government legalized murdering of 80 million children. It's kind of hard for me to listen to whatever you're saying, because what you're saying don't match what you're trying to comport or contort in this field. Over here you're saying you want to ban these guns because they're killing our children. We throw a fit because we have a mass shooting and there's 19 kids killed. That's a terrible, just terrible thing. But they don't talk about the 3,000 some children they already killed that day. They kill 3,000 children a day, more than 3,000 children a day, over 1.1 million children a year we kill in America, just in America. And that's not the ones that we support in other countries, because we push abortion in other countries. America takes money to help other countries get abortion clinics set up so they can abort children. So whenever you say let's ban guns so we can save children, I don't want to hear that argument from you at all. Because if you're not going to ban abortion, I don't want to hear nothing about 19 in Connecticut. I am upset when mass future comment will be welcoming back to droughts and pestilence for the remnant. See, there's only, like you say, and I agree with you there. The only problem I have with that is every single time I read in the Bible where God judges a nation, believers go with him. You know what I mean? Look at Daniel. When all they got carried off with him, they suffer with him. I think that's one of the reasons we should be saying these things, because when God judges America, we may be with him. We're not gonna, I don't, in my personal view, I don't believe we have to go through the tribulation. But America being destroyed might not be the tribulation, and we're going to have to ride that boat too. I mean, he wraps all of it up. I mean, we're just as guilty as everybody else because we worry about all these things that we have to worry about. You know, people are worried about their golf game and, you know, what they got to do this week and this and that. And I'm not harping on nobody. I'm guilty too. I got to do this. I got that. I got this. I got that. I got this. I got to take care of this. I got to take care of this. And none of that has to do with 3,000 children being killed. You know, I try to make it to abortion clinics. I'm trying to set up another one with my church right now so we can go and preach all day you know, we got to drive like 60 miles to get there. There's not one around where I live. But man, I mean, we're just allowing this stuff. You get what I mean? And anyhow, I don't mean to get off on a tangent, but God calls us to submit to every government, because he's the one that put it there. And that's just getting a little difficult for me. I'm not going to lie to you. It's very difficult for me. Let's read verse 15, right? 1 Peter 2:15. For it is the will of God that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Now, you can do this every day. By our good works, our good deeds, which people shall see, and they may glorify God in the day of his visitation. Also, the good works that you do will silence the foolish talk of ignorant men. And that can be in an instance where you are walking it out, performing these good works, and somebody says, let's say somebody, give you an example, somebody says something around somebody who knows you, and behind your back, you're not there, and they say something, you know, bad about you or out of the way about you, and somebody says, dude, you must be out of your mind. You get what I mean? Look at these things that are being done. You get what I mean? They look to the works that you're doing, and they don't have any reason to accuse you. And those things get turned around on them, which is another verse that comes to mind during these things is, you know, when Jesus is talking about people who do evil are afraid to come into the light because they know that their deeds are evil, but people who are doing well bring their deeds into the light so that it may be manifest that they are wrought in God. If you bring your bad deeds out before people have an opportunity to bring them out on you, it looks kind of stupid when they're like, hey, you know, so-and-so, did you hear what he did? Oh, you mean this thing? Well, yeah, we already know about it. He told us. You get what I mean? People, in those instances, people look for the things that they think you will keep secret because they're not good. And they prey on those things in your life to use them against you. However, if you bring those deeds into the light first, nobody has the opportunity to accuse you because you bring those things forward yourself. And when people go to gossip about it, they're like, hey, did you hear he did this, he did that? And they're like, yep, I heard it. And actually, I heard it from him because he told me he did these things and he came and asked us for forgiveness for it. They don't have any way to accuse you. So that ignorant talk that they're about to get into is silenced by your good works. Same type of thing here. Your good works, there's a lot of reasons for good works, but your good works always will silence the foolish talk of ignorant men, the gossip of ignorant people who come and say these things against you in ignorance or in maliciousness, are silenced by the good works that you are performing. Excuse me. And that's why you need to have good works. This is one of the things that the Catholic Church and many others conflate, is that they use these works for salvation. You already have salvation, and that's specifically why you have the good deeds that you have. But in this context, it's reverence toward government, toward obeying your leaders. One of the things about obeying all authority, cops, judges, whoever is in authority over you, obeying them is a sign of good works that will go forth in front of you. Your good works will travel before you. And this is it, like I say, with police officers. I mean, I had, one of the times I got pulled over, I can remember, because I remember it was such a change from when I was younger, and I would go in there and let's say like when you get a ticket, if you go to court, the cop who gave you the ticket is in there with you, and he's standing up there in front of the judge with you, and he gives a report, a short report on how you were during that traffic stop. And the judge takes that stuff into account, whether he's going to discount your ticket or discount your points or whatever else. And I had one of the cops say it was the best encounter I've ever had pulling someone over. And the guy erased all my points and gave me like half the money. He was like, the judge, he's like, I'm gonna take away all your points and just pay half the fine. It's like $80. I was like, I appreciate it. Because when the guy pulled me over, just for instance, when you get pulled over, if you're like me and you have guns in the car, immediately, when they're pulling me over, all my windows are down. I roll all my windows all the way down. That way they can see into the truck. When they're walking up and they get near the back window, they can see the entire truck. I got my hands on the wheel. Most of the time, I put my hands out the door. I just sit with my hands out the door. And I've had cops come up and be like, why are your hands out the window? And I'm like, because I got a gun. You're 12 o'clock, my 3, you're 12 o'clock, it's my 3 o'clock. It's on my hip. I got my license. What would you like me to do? My license is here. My insurance is here. I'm not reaching for a thing. And they're like, no worries. You just sit tight. I'll take care of this. No worries. Yes, sir. Gotcha. I keep my hands out the entire time. Yes, sir. No, sir. And all the stuff that's going around about, there are cops that are bad, that do bad things. But for the most part, it's your actions that draw on a lot of these things. Like a lot of times when cops shoot people on a traffic stop, it's like, I always ask, where's the cars at? I don't see the cars. Where are the cars? Oh, the man ran. Well, brother, when you got somebody who's poorly trained in a heightened situation, they're not going to make good choices. Cops are very poorly trained. Not poorly trained. They just don't they don't receive training. When you talk about like a Navy SEAL going into combat, he trains for 6 to 8 months to go on a 6-month or a 3-month deployment. And he's training hard every day for long hours with his team. That's the reason why they're able to go in and operate at the level they're operating at. They go through every possible scenario there is and train to the highest ability. And cops get what? The academy and maybe a training here, a training there, and they just get thrown out there. I'm not taking up for the bad ones, but there are a lot of good ones out there. And your actions towards them is what determines how these situations go. You keep your hands out, windows down. If it's at night, I roll on my windows down and turn the inside light on. And hands out. Even if I don't have a gun, I keep my hands out. I want to make them feel comfortable so that, I understand that if I'm walking up to a car at night, all the windows are up, and I got to knock on a window that's tinted, I can guarantee you, if I was a cop, I'd already have my gun out. I'm not, you're going to get shot through a window, shot through the back window. I mean, you have no idea what's on the other side of that. I'd be nervous off the bat. So I do those things in order. And then I, had a conversation with the guy. There was some kind of misunderstanding going on with my license. I didn't know about it. We talked about it. He was like, okay, well, listen, I'm not going to arrest you. I'm supposed to, but I'm not going to, since you've been so great with me. Just call somebody to come get you, have somebody carry your truck home, and go get this thing figured out. So that way, you don't run into another cop down the road and have the same problem. Sure, no problem. Call somebody up, come get me. I believe it was Eric, as a matter of fact. Call me up, come get me. Had my, ex-wife at the time take the truck, take it home. I go and figure out what's going on at DMV, take off work, get it handled, and the next day it's fine. I go into court. I was out there talking with the cop, thanking for his service, appreciate everything you're doing, all that stuff. I go to court. they basically throw the thing out. He, shakes my hand, tell me appreciate you. No problem. If you're obeying your leaders, the people God has put in charge, you don't have these, a lot of the problems that go on in our country. The problem is when you get pulled over or any other thing and you're automatically combative right off the bat, you're not obeying these. Do it by good deeds. You would silence the foolish talk of ignorant people. Make, honoring the leaders God has put in charge over you. When you obey all those things, it's like, scripture says, who is eager to harm you if you do what is right? If you're doing what is good, who is eager to harm you? Now, there are some people that are doing good that get harmed. Yes, that's the way our world works. Sin is never going away till Jesus comes back. It's always going to be here. So there are injustices that happen. But for the most part, if you're doing what is right, people aren't that eager to harm you. All right, so verse 16, as free men, and not using your liberty as a cloak for maliciousness, but as for servants of God. Liberty, that word is key. Liberty. So I once heard a definition of liberty, and it's probably not the definition that's in, I'm pretty sure it's not the definition that's in the dictionary, but here it is. Liberty is not the freedom to do whatever you want. Liberty is the freedom to do what you know is right. That's a huge difference, And in our country, we have supposed to have liberty, the freedom to do what is right, not the freedom to do whatever you want. And what God is saying here is you have freedom in Christ. Don't use it for malicious things. Don't use it for evil. Don't use your freedom as a ticket to do whatever you want, because you've been redeemed, you've been saved, and you're not to use those things as a ticket to go live however you want. You have to live the way God has ordained you to live, and you're not allowed to take your freedom and just go out there and do whatever you want, because ultimately you're not autonomously free. You have to answer for all of those things, and you may pay a penalty for those things. Like I say, I mean, you got freedom to burn the flag, but I got the freedom to stomp you out if I see you doing it. You get what I mean? You have the freedom to do certain things, but you shouldn't always do it. But those freedoms are malicious. Like I said about burning the flag, you have the freedom to burn it, but you should realize that the whole reason you have that freedom is because people died to give you that freedom. And if you're burning that flag, you're spitting on the people who died to give it to you. That it makes no sense. I just don't understand this stuff. And those are in those big cities. We don't have that around here. We would, I'd like to think we wouldn't put up with that, and we shouldn't. All right. Honor all men. Love the brothers in Christ. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the king. And if you ever get in a misunderstanding about what you should do in life in general, I got one verse for you, and I didn't have it planned, so I didn't have it pulled up, but I will flip right to it. And this verse means a lot to me. Ever in doubt. Now he says, fear God, honor the king. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. You ever encourageable about what you should do? Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the entire duty of man. Fearing God is one of the things we're talking about with honoring your government, honoring the people who are in charge over you. I'm finding it, like I say, ever harder to honor the people that are in our government, because they're not honorable people and they don't do honorable things. I mean, they are, in my opinion, most of them anymore are just complete trash. I'm finding it so hard to honor. Like I said, this is a tough one for me. I have a hard time with it. But if you back to when I was talking about Jocko's podcast, if you ever, you need to listen to that whole thing. Is an hour and something long, but just that type of thing. When you talk about doing something to me personally, I could deal with that. We start talking about my children, we're talking about a different story. I promise you, I would lay my life down in a hurry over something like that. We're not going to bow down for that. No time this year. So I may have some answering to do. I don't have this one down fully, man. I really don't. And usually I don't go through those things on my channel. I'm just being transparent with you that this one's a hard one for me. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. And like I say, one of the reasons it's hard for me is because these people who are writing these things to us were under tyrannical government when they wrote them. It's not like they had some pie in the sky government that, and they weren't going out and doing any kind of maliciousness or taking people out or defending themselves. There was none of that. They submitted themselves to the Lord and to his ordinances and his commands, in that they're trusting in his judgment. You get what I mean? Even if Adolf Hitler does all these evil things, kills all these, people, he's going to face a judgment one day. And it's going to be way worse than any judgment that I could give to him. You get what I mean? Anything that I could do to defend myself and my family against any of these people ain't going to be nothing upon what the Lord will do at the end. And it comes down to, do I trust him to make the judgments? If I get put into a bad position where I'm, and done nothing wrong, as far as I'm a sinner, but I've done nothing wrong to deserve some type of tyrannical government coming in and taking over, and like an Adolf Hitler type of thing, or Mao, or he ain't the only one. There's been, do you know that there's a stat that says that we killed more people, innocent, when you say innocent, worldly innocent people, in the 20th century alone than we did in all the other 19 before it. If you combine all the killing from 1 AD to now, we've killed more people in the 20th century than we have in all other 19 combined. That's scary. I mean, over 100 million people have been killed over worldly ideologies, communism, these type ideologies, under the governments who reign under those type ideologies. Over 100 million people have been killed. I think there's a part of it to say, if you don't think that our government is capable of that, you haven't been paying attention to our government at all lately. At all. It is off the rails bad. Off the rails bad. And I just know that the apostles and these type people submitted to the same type governments. They didn't fight back. But at the same time, when do you fight back? Were our founding fathers out of the way for fighting back against the British and not obeying them and forming this great nation? Or see, you see what I'm saying? These are the battles I fight. I noticed the apostles didn't do that, but our founding fathers did. Which one's right? Which one? If which shoes am I going to be in that I'm going to have to take some heavy answering for? That's my pickle, if you will. For this is now servants. This is where it's going to get thick. So hang with me. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to those that are good and gentle, but also to those who are rough or forward or unreasonable. For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongly. Now, you're doing good and you're suffering for it anyway. You have somebody who's in charge of you, a master over you, and they're not gentle. They're not nice. They're tyrannical. They throw you beatings. They do all of these things, and you do nothing to earn these things. They're just doing it out of maliciousness. God says obey them. Obey them even if they're bad, because they have a master as well, and they are going to have to answer for how they were when they were a master. You get what I mean? They're not, if you're in some type of servanthood under a master directly, and you got a bad one, if you in conscience toward God endure the beatings and the suffering and whatever they put you through, because your conscience toward God, in the fact that you know that that master has a master, and he's going to have to answer for all of that to a person who can, like Jesus said, don't fear him who can kill the body only, but fear him who, after he kills the body, can kill the soul also. I think about these verses when I hear about slavery in our country, how people hold such a grudge about it. And I understand where you're coming from. I don't like the lying about it. That bothers me, or the fact that only one side, the whole thing of it is irritating. As far as, they've used the word racist so much that it doesn't even have any meaning anymore. But there's no such thing as racism, because there's no such thing as different races. There's one race, the human race. That's it. We're different colors. Like I tell my children, when I'm riding in a car with my children, we don't see a ton of cattle out on a range, and we say, well, look at all them different races of cattle. I mean, it's horses, whatever it may be. They're different colors. They're all horses. And maybe brown, maybe black, maybe white with some brown spots, however you want to look at them. But they're all horses. I don't immediately say, look at all those different races of horses out there. There's only one race. That's the human race. And then we're different colors. That's it. This whole deal about racism, you have people who never owned slaves, people who never were slaves, still complaining about slavery. I don't, and then you have the hypocrisy of things like, I'll give you, for instance, you have people like, what's his name? LeBron James, basketball player, right? He has a shoe deal with China. Why does he have a shoe deal with China? Because you can make them cheaper in China, right? Why do we have all this stuff in our houses? I don't think you can hardly find stuff that's made in the USA hardly anymore. Everything's made in China. Why? Because it's cheaper to make it over there. But why is it cheaper? Because they use slavery to do it. They subject people for no wage and make them work unreasonable hours. I mean, just ridiculous. It's slavery. There are more slaves today than there ever were in the history of the world. Slavery is huge today. Huge. Not to mention that every culture group on the planet has been slaves at one time or another. But yet, I mean, these are why, they're taking down. I heard this week that they're going to take down the Washington Monument, in New York, the statue of George Washington, because he owned slaves. Yeah, I've been reading George Washington's biography. The man got up every day and worked in the field with knew them all by name. It wasn't like what you hear, what you hear about. But what I'm saying to you here is, even if you had a slave today and their masters are mean and hateful, our Bible says submit to them, because they have a master above you. And it is commendable and acceptable before God to suffer for doing right. Look what he says here. Look at verse 19. For it is thankworthy if a man for conscience toward God endures grief, suffering wrongly. For what glory is it, verse 20, when you be buffeted for your faults, or you be treated harshly for something you did wrong, and you take it patiently? But if you do well, and suffer for that, and you take that patiently, this is commendable before God. Why on earth would that be commendable before God? Look at the next verse. For even hereunto were you called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving an example that we should follow in his footsteps. I've heard supposed Christian pastors who are black guys who are calling for reparation payments and always talking about the injustice of slavery. Why don't you read these verses right here? If it was an injustice and you were done wrongly, I agree. But if your conscience toward God, that, brother, you are, all of us, every single one of us are made in to suffer. If you are a Christian, guess what? Suffering's coming. And you should take it patiently, even if you're doing right. You know why? Because Christ suffered too. The man never did any wrong. You want to talk about racism? There ain't no race on this planet that has been hated, persecuted more than the Jewish people. I mean, the entire Holocaust, was over this specific thing. And I know you can go on TV and Whoopi Goldberg's telling you that the Holocaust didn't have anything to do with race. She's a complete idiot. The people that are allowed to even speak in our country, complete idiot. I'm telling you that the people who are running around complaining about this type of stuff are not conscious toward God at all, period. None whatsoever. Because even if suffering comes toward us, anybody, if you are a Christian, you are supposed to take this patiently because you are conscious toward God. And this type of suffering should be a badge of honor to you. To suffer for doing what's right should be a badge of honor because you're put in the same category as Jesus Christ. And anytime you can be put in that category, it's a win. I don't care what kind of life what kind of things you're suffering through. If you can be put in the same category as Christ, suffering for what is right, that's a place I'd like to be in my book. But if you have injustices done, walking around complaining about it is not being conscious toward God at all. And the lying and the manipulating that's going on in our country to divide us way further than what need be. I personally don't see the type of racisms and things that are going on, on TV that you see. I don't see that in my neighborhood. I mean, I talk to black people all the time. I don't have a problem at all. They don't have a problem with me. Just as cordial as anybody else. Hey, how you doing? Your skin color matters nothing to me. It should be back toward the day, if you remember, one of their heroes, Martin Luther King, said that a man should not be judged on skin color, but on the character, who he is as a person. That's what we judge on, your character, who you are as a person and the things you do. That is what you should be judged on, not by the color of your skin. And by the way, doors swing always. If you're going to say white men are bad because they own slaves 300 years ago, that's called racism. Because just because my skin is white, I'm automatically in the category as them. And it's pretty sad because now they're, in schools, you have, white people getting attacked and that type of thing, and people celebrating that kind of thing. If you're a Christian and you support that, I don't want to hear nothing. The social justice movement that's going on in the church, I don't want to hear none of that crap. None of it. There may be some suffering wrongly, but brother, it's commendable toward God. You need to look at that a different way, because God gave us an example in his son. You want to complain about your suffering? I can guarantee you it ain't matched a thing that Jesus Christ went through, not even on a good day. And he is our example. We are always to be looking toward him as our example. So if we suffer for what is right, we don't walk around and complain and talk about it. And you should be shouting for joy because you're in the same camp that he's in. this whole division we got going, I'm not going to be surprised if I see a, blacks only water fountain or whites only water fountain. I mean, it is getting ridiculous. And it's very sad to see, what we're going through as a nation. It really is. I care, not whether, somebody asked not too long ago, I heard a guy saying, well, what if Jesus was black? I don't care if the man was turquoise. If he's taking away sin, I'm in, baby. I don't care what color that man is. I could care less. People are like arguing on college campus about, he's a Middle Eastern man, so he's not white and he might be, dude, I don't care. If this man died for my sins, he's offering me salvation and a way out of my sins and hope. The man can be purple. I care nothing about that. Nothing. And I'm convinced of his character is the highest morality the world has ever seen. And therefore I judge him by his character. I know his character is the greatest of any character of anybody that's ever lived. Therefore, I put my trust and faith in him. Couldn't care what color he is. Can't even believe people argue about this stuff. It really is sad. Just, I'll leave it at that. So here we go. Who did no sin? Verse 22, he's telling you, he did no sin, neither was any deceit found in his mouth. Who, when he was, and this is what I'm saying to you, when he was reviled, he reviled not again. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed to himself to him who judges rightly. See that? When he suffered, I extrapolate that to our government. If there ever comes a day of where they really, are tyrannical to the max, and you're talking about like a Hitler-esque type of thing. Jesus never reviled when he was reviled. And when he suffered, he didn't threaten anybody. I mean, you want to talk about, I'll pick up I got all that stuff, military gear, put it on, man. We're going to defend. I just don't see Jesus doing that. And that's the hard part for me. I mean, Jesus had the power. He didn't have to pick up no AR-15 or plated armored vest or grenades or missile launchers or F-15s or none of that mess. He could have spoke everybody out of existence. I mean, in an instant. He could have put the worst possible pain. I mean, think about it. The man could have killed somebody with an outstretched hand and then intensified the pain inside their body to make it 80 million times what a human being has ever seen. And he did none of that. He had the power to take out everybody, but didn't do a thing. Now, I know he's accomplishing dying for the sins of the world, and that's the entire reason he came. But he is our example. And we are supposed to suffer as he suffered and go through it patiently. Why? Because we know him who judges justly. And we put every situation we're put into, we put into his hands. And we say, if we get put in prison for the next 10 years, if they come to my house tomorrow and try to arrest me for preaching the gospel or whatever it may be, if that becomes illegal, which, won't be long, it'll be hate speech, and then you won't be allowed to use it no more. But if they were, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to fight back? Or am I supposed to judge, kiss my family goodbye and entrust myself to him who judges rightly? Bible tells me to kiss my family goodbye and trust myself to him who judges rightly. Whether that's going into a concentration camp or whether that's going into prison or whether that's being treated, mistreated or whatever have you, whatever it may be. And that can go even down to husbands and wives. If your wife is mistreating you, or your husband's mistreating you, now when we get down to like heavy abuse, I don't think it's, right for you to stay there. I think you should definitely get out of that. So like one of the things that Calvin had in his commentary, like when a husband and wife, when things don't go right, you just don't rebel, against that institution and go against it. You have to endure it. And Calvin saying same thing here. When you get into these type deals with government or leaders or whoever, you're supposed to deal with it because there is a purpose behind it. Kind of like Joseph. I think about Joseph from Genesis being put in prison for 10 years for something he didn't. I mean, he didn't do what he was being accused of. He sat in that prison and rotted for 10 years. God meant it for evil. I mean, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good to save many people alive. I mean, how do you know on the other side that's not what it's going to be? If I rebel and pull out my AR-15s and go to shooting when something goes wrong, do I get the same outcome? Probably not. Will I have to answer for that? Would you have to answer for that? What type of answering would I have to do for that? Those are the, when I think about those things, those come into play. I mean, realistically, lastly, I mean, I had someone from our church, we were just talking, passing conversation, and they said, "Oh, if they come to get my guns, I'm mowing them down." And I'm like, "All right, let's be realistic about this." And this is something all of you need to think about if you have the mindset that I have, or they come down your street, take guns away. They're not coming with one or two people to your door, knock on the door where you're going to be able to fight back. You get what I mean? It's going to be armored trucks rolling down your street with lots of men. If you could shoot your way out of that, which you probably can't, not unless you got some type of militia going and you got a whole slew of people at your house ready to go. If, like they say, you can't outrun a radio, somebody's going to be radioing for backup as soon as the shooting starts going down. I can guarantee it. Somebody else is coming. You ain't got long to get put them people down and get the heck out of there. If that happened, if you were able to even do that, where are you going? You're not going to make it very far. You're definitely not going to be traveling in a car on the road because they're going to block all the roads off. That's going to be the end of that. I mean, you get what I mean? It ain't just as easy as people, oh, they ain't taking my guns away. It ain't going to be as easy as you think it is, brother, especially if you got a family. I got 6 kids and four of them are small. You trying to move in a battle style, way with people shooting at you. You got small kids with you. Good luck. I mean, dude. And the person I was talking to said, "You make me feel very depressed about this situation." And I said, "I'm just trying to be honest with you. I mean, this ain't 1776 no more. At what point do you just allow it to happen and you go with them, or give away all your means of defending yourself? So next time they come, you have no means of defending yourself." Adolf Hitler ran on that. That was the three things that Hitler ran on, that he won on by a landslide, was, "I'm going to take away your guns because nobody's going to mess with us. We'll take care of you. Trust me, the government will take care of you. Ain't nobody going to mess with it. We got tanks, we got bombs. We are ruthless. I'll give you free schooling and I'll give you free health care." If that sounds familiar to you, you ought to read up on your history. As they say, man learns from history, that man learns nothing from history. We don't do history anymore. That's why they're trying to erase it. Because if you know your history, it's harder. See, this is one of the reasons why I believe they're trying to erase our history in this country, because you're going to have a hard time, in my opinion, taking over the country right now when you have a lot of people like me, or you, or if you're a patriotic American and you will stand for this country, because you love the ideas of what the country was set up on to begin with, and you're not involved in none of this other garbage that's going on. If you're into that camp versus any other, the free health care, when they take away your guns, you have no means of defending yourself anymore. So when they come back, it's over. It's over. You get what I mean? When Hitler came to take all these people away, they had no means to defend themselves. It'll be over. And when there's people like you and me, patriotic Americans, who would lay down their lives for this country, it's gonna be a lot harder to take it over than it will when they just teach your children to hate this country. And within a generation or two, I mean, you think about if you're older like me, think about the kids that you're seeing now that are in their like 15s to 20-year-olds right now. You think those kids are willing to just jump out there and die for this country? No, they hate this country. You hear it all the time. People are like, "Oh, this country's so terrible." Like college kids, you can watch videos of this stuff. Oh, this country's horrible. We're nothing but a bunch of colonizers and slave owners. And no. They don't have to come take it over when you're here. They just wait for you to get old, and they teach your children to hate this country, and then teach your children's children to hate this country. And then when they go to take it over, people just willingly give it away because they don't care about it anyway. That's one reason. That's one of the reasons why I don't necessarily disagree with what Eric said about I'm not proud to be an American, but I am, blessed that I'm here because it is the greatest country on the planet, or has been, not anymore. But I mean, I think it still sort of is, because if you talk to some immigrants, a lot of times, if you really get into a conversation with an immigrant that worked hard to get here, I've never met anybody more angry about what's going on right now than a lady I met from Chile who came here and worked and their fingers to the bone. She said, she said, America is the last great hope. Coming from somebody who's not from America, she said, there's no other country we could have gone to and had this kind of opportunity. She said, my son's in Harvard. He's going for I think a lawyer or doctor. My daughter's a doctor, and my other son is in New York, and he makes like $5 million a year. She said, we would have never, ever. She's an older lady. She said, my husband and I would have never had that opportunity where we came from, or any countries that we looked at running to. America was it. That was it. And when that goes away, there won't be one for us to run to. There ain't going to be no more. And them teaching our children to hate our country so that they'll just give it away is one reason it makes me stronger into. Now, the other thing that I have a problem with on this is the idolatry of it. When does it become idolatry to love my country and stand for that country against what God has told you to do, or what God tells you to do here? Where is that line of where I've become idolatrous in loving this nation and caring for this nation and be willing to die for this nation, versus saying, this nation's under God's judgment and I'm in submission to him, and whatever comes that way, I have to trust in him. I fight that battle a lot. I'm just here to tell you, I'm just being honest with you. I fight that battle a lot. Where you stand on it is, I would say, I would stand with Martin Luther and say to go against conscience is neither right nor safe. You need to do what your conscience tells you to do and be in prayer about these things. Like I said, I was having trouble even teaching this class. It's a tough subject, for me. It may not be tough for anybody else. It's tough for me. And these are the type of things I struggle with when I go through these things. So like I said, on July 4th, I had a hard time this year celebrating. I mean, what are we celebrating? Abortion and murder and pedophilia and naked people dancing in front of children. We're celebrating that. Churches with gay pride flags and transgender flags all over their stuff. Gay pastors. I mean, people just, the marriage up to like 75% divorce rate. I mean, it's higher in the church than it is on the street. I mean, it is ridiculous. I mean, what are we celebrating anymore? Because the ideals that we're all standing there waving that flag on 4th of July don't exist anymore, in my opinion. So, I mean, they just don't. They exist in our minds, but not in our leadership. That ship has sailed. They're way too far now. This is one of the reasons why I'm not a big Trump guy. That man is not a Messiah, and he ain't gonna save us. There's only one Messiah that's coming to save us, and it ain't gonna be through giving us our rights back. I think it's too deep for him. You know what I mean? I don't think one man's going to be able to become president and fix. There's just so much. The FBI, the DOJ, the ATF, the Department of Homeland Security, the Border Security. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it is everywhere. And there's just no escaping it. It's too deep, too broad. for one person to fight. So we're in for a ride. Better hold on tight, because I'm telling you, it's getting worse by the hour, not by the day. I think worse by the minute. And like I said, just we need to be in prayer about it heavily. And I'm not, and please, if I love the Lord, don't get me wrong, but I think if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I will heal their land, and people just hanging on to that thing for dear life. I mean, you need to look around, read Romans 1. We're in judgment. I mean, we've been turned over. I mean, like one of the only things I've ever heard Billy Graham, agree. Not that I don't. I just hate the guy or disagree with him. I mean, he says a ton of good things, and I'm happy with the work that the Lord did through him. I think he's got a lot of error, but he said, if God don't, we have become Sodom and Gomorrah anymore. And no, people don't have any idea what's coming, and it's going to be just like in the days of Noah, when people were marrying and giving in marriage and partying, and flood came and wiped them away. I mean, man, it's scary. Let's finish this up. Verse 24, 25. Who his own self bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we, being dead to sin, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. For you were as sheep going astray, but are now returned to the shepherd and the bishop of your souls. And that, just as a side note, he uses the term sheep a lot as far as going astray. I've told you before, sheep are dumb animals, man. As a matter of fact, when they do slaughters, they have a lead sheep that will lead all the other sheep into the slaughter, turn back around and go back and get more. And they just lead their own kind to slaughter. They'll have one that leads the rest of them into the slaughterhouse, and it turns around and goes back to get more, and comes back and leads them into slaughter, and turns around and goes back and gets more. I mean, these things will walk off a cliff. They're just, they ain't bright. I mean, they have to be shepherded, or they just, it's not good. And this is the reason why he uses this. It goes to show you who we are. When he calls us sheep all the time, we, like sheep, have gone astray, every man to his own way. And our iniquities, like the wind, carry us away. We are like that. We have to be shepherded. We need to be under the shepherd, because we will walk away just like sheep. Oh, what's that over there? And we're gone. But just, I would say, to take into these things, take time in prayer. Like I said, if you're like me, you're any type of patriot American, you know what I mean, and love the ideals, like I said, of this country, and don't want your kids to be taught this stuff, going through this stuff. You want them to know what our founding fathers stood for, and why so many men have fought to defend this. I mean, the average age of men storming the beach of Normandy was 17 years old. I mean, these are kids running into oncoming fire, you know what I mean? And for love of this country. And then you got people spitting on it. If you teach your kids the ideals that this country was set up upon, just like you teach them the Bible, and because those things correlate, and why we're willing to die for these things, I would say be watchful of idolatry. I have to watch for it. And your conscience, be in prayer, man, because this one, like I said, for me is tough. Maybe tough for you, maybe not. But where should you stand in these things ultimately? And that's only something God can reveal to you. And don't go against conscience, because it's not right or safe. We followed up 1 Peter chapter 2, finish that up. So now we're going to go into 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm sorry. 1 Peter chapter 3. I will do that in a couple of days. I have to teach this Sunday twice. I have to teach, and I have to play in the band this Sunday, so I have to memorize 5 or 6 songs and get all my leads down and all that stuff. So it'll be a busy week, but I'll get back to you Wednesday night. We'll start with 1 Peter chapter 3. Appreciate y'all being here. Love y'all very much. Thank you for your time, and forgive my ranting a little bit on this one. But you be in prayer for me, I'll be in prayer for you, and we'll fight this battle together. That's all we can do. Put our trust in the Lord. And I will finish with one verse. Just remember, some men trust in horses and chariots, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. Some men trust in AR-15s and bombs and tactical skills. I would rather, I do the same, but I would rather trust in the name of the Lord my God, because it's a lot stronger than anything that I can possess. I love you all. If you need me, holler. I'll see you.